Hello friends, good evening. Myself Pushpender Singh and we are going to start with our daily current affairs. So today you have 9th of June 2021 and these lectures are basically useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination which is conducted by the UPSC. Alright. As you know that we are mainly concerning about the civil services examination which is conducted by the UPSC. Okay, and we are referring the two national newspapers like the Hindu and Current Affairs, the Hindu and Indian Express for that purpose for the current affairs, and you should also read these two national newspapers, and you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for supplementing of your preparation related to the civil services examination for these current affairs. Alright, so let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first news is about the Mekong Corporation. Okay, so Lankang and Mekong, these are the basically the name of the river. It is the similar river or it is the same river which passes from China to Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. So these are basically, you know, some of these countries through that these river called Mekong River which flows through these countries. So recently the China is basically hosting right the foreign ministers right of the Mekong Corporation, right, which basically consisting of the riparian states like China, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. China is also hosting the foreign ministers from the 10 Asian countries also, right? So the China is currently hosting the 10 Asian foreign ministers. Apart from that, right, the foreign ministers belong to the Mekong Corporation, right, which is also hosting by the China, right? So what is this Mekong Corporation? See, Mekong Corporation is basically a multilateral format, or it's a platform where all such foreign leader, all such states can coordinate among themselves for the cooperation and for the coordination between the riparian states specifically related to this Lekong River or the Mekong River, right? Which is basically, the transnational river which passes through the different nations. Okay, so first let us understand about the Asian countries. Okay, that we are concerning about this Asian countries. The China is hosting basically the 10 the Asian countries related to their foreign affairs, right, or the minister of their foreign affairs. So these 10 Asian countries basically consisting of the Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Okay, under this hosting of this foreign ministers conference, the China is basically providing, right, lot of aid in terms of the COVID-19 vaccines, as well as through that the foreign ministers hosting, that is in the real context, is basically also cooperating in the vaccine research and the Southeast Asian countries in that respect to boost the influence in the region to counter the US, right. Recently the US basically the US the warship recently entered into the South China Sea, which is basically involving the waters of the South China Sea. So China would also urge all the Asian countries, right, that it would urgently implement the China Asian Public Health Corporation initiative, right. Under that, the China would continue to provide the support to the Asian emergency medical material reserves, as well as the strengthen regional public health capacity building procedure in that respect. And China has already provided around 100 million, right, the COVID-19 the vaccine doses to those Asian countries as per its mandate to provide the medical assistance to those Asian countries. Regarding this Mekong Corporation, let us understand about this Mekong Corporation. So as I told you, it is a multilateral format which basically involving various countries where this Mekong River basically flows. Okay, so Mekong basically is an area, all right, basically with the greatest development potential in the Asia and the beyond, right. So here that we are talking about the Lankang and the Mekong is differ in the name, but we are referring the similar river, right, which is the most important river running across the China as well as the Indo-China Peninsula. This Indochina Peninsula consisting of the Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand and Vietnam. So it is a similar river referring to the same river which passes through the China and Indochina Peninsula, right? This Lekong River that we are talking, the Lekong River, which basically originates from China's Qinghai Tibet Plateau. It's basically originated from the China's Qinghai, Tibet Plateau, right? That river had its source in the Yushu in the Qinghai provinces, right, which belongs to the China, and where it is called the Lenkeng River in the Qinghai provinces as well as in whole China. And as soon as it enters the downstream after flowing out from the Yunnan provinces, it is called basically the Mekong River, right? And then subsequently it runs across the Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, across the countries, and it basically flows around 44,880 kilometers. Okay, it is the total stretch of the river which basically flows through these countries. Okay, and it basically feed all together millions of the people all along the stretch for that river. Okay, so the Lengkong is basically a part of the Mekong that flows through the China that I just now explained you. Okay, and the riparian states basically, or the downstream states, are Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam and Thailand. These are some of the riparian states or the downstream states of the river Mekong. So here the river Mekong, which basically originate, as I told you, right, it originates from the China's Qinghai Tibet Plateau, right? And it basically, specifically if you see, it's a Qinghai province or the Qinghai province of the China, where it is known as the Linkang or the Lenkang River. And subsequently, as it flows through the Yunnan provinces, it is known as the Mekong River. And then it subsequently flows through the different countries all along the stretch. Okay. Next, you have the raising and accelerating the MSME performance program. Okay. This raising and accelerating MSME performance program, it has been backed by, or it has been approved by the World Bank for the purpose of providing, right, the aid for the purpose of boosting the India's micro, small and medium enterprise sector. As you know that this sector, micro, small and the medium enterprise sector that we are talking basically, is of greater importance, because it is basically, almost, supporting the India GDP in that respect, and in that respect supporting of this MSME sector during this COVID-19 pandemic is of greater importance. So here the raising and accelerating MSME performance, right, will support a part of, the government of India's the overall, the MSME competitiveness, a post COVID, resilience and the recovery program, right, with special focus on, the policy and the governance, the access to the markets, okay, the access to the technology, access to the finance, and as well as the knowledge dissemination to the MSME sector. So in that respect, right, 500 million US dollars, right, the foreign aid, or the World Bank is providing the 500 million US dollars, the aid, for the purpose of, improving the conditions of the MSME sector, specifically in the context of, the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, the first of such aid is being provided, right, by the World Bank itself. It was approved in July 2020. That was 750 US million dollars, the finance that was provided for the purpose of MSME or MSME emergency response program, right, definitely to, you know to to alleviate some of the stress that was imposed on the MSME because of the COVID related restrictions as well as the lockdowns, to immediately, provide the liquidity and the credit needs, right, to millions of the MSMEs which are severely impacted because of COVID-19 pandemic, right? So it is one such important, program to support MSMEs. Let us understand about the features. As you know that the program basically targets, some sort of improvements in the performance of around 5.5 lakh MSMEs or micro, small and medium enterprises, right? And it is basically, altogether it is basically going to expand or going to mobilize the finance of around 15.5 billion US dollars. So To that extent, the finance will be mobilized through the help of the World Bank, right? And it is also a part of the government of India's, right, 3.4 billion, the MSME competitiveness package that I was talking about, the post-COVID resilience and the recovery program, right? That was supported by the government of India, right? And along with the World Bank, that is going to be, mobilizing around 15 billion US dollars for the purpose of the recovery of, that's MSME sector. And this, the raising accelerating, MSME performance program that we are talking will provide the better access to the finance and the working capitals for the MSME, definitely by strengthening, the financial market for that purpose. Okay. And it will also scale up the dispute resolution mechanism, right? Definitely, because due to the COVID-19, you have the delayed payments to the MSMEs, right? So here the delayed payment also stressed, their accounts, right, for the purpose of sustaining the business. So definitely some sort of a disputes arises. So the online dispute resolution mechanism would definitely help in, getting the finance or getting this delayed payment from the sources. Okay, so here 500 million US dollars loan would be provided by the International Bank for the reconstruction and the development, right? And this loan, 500 million US dollars loan, is basically having the maturity of 18.5 years, and that will also have a grace period of around 5.5 years. Okay, that we are talking about, the International Bank for the Reconstruction and the Development, right, is a basically international finance institution which was established in 1944. It was established way back in 1944. Okay, it has been headquartered in Washington DC in the United States of America, and is basically one of the the leading arm of the World Bank Group. The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development basically offers the loan to the middle income developing countries like India. All right. Next, the Rattle Hydropower project. As you know that the Rattle Hydropower project is basically a project for the purpose of the construction of 850 megawatt, the Rattle Hydropower project on the river, you know on the river basically Chenab. So it is a project which was proposed, right, to construct 850 megawatt of hydroelectric power generation on the river Chenab. So here the National Hydropower Corporation Limited, right, which is the premier hydropower company, belongs to the government of India or the Ministry of Power, right, have formed the joint venture company. That joint venture company is known as the Rattle Hydroelectric Power Corporation Limited. Okay, it is a joint venture company which is basically consisting of the two partners, or predominantly two partners, consisting of, the first is basically the NHPC, that is National Hydropower Corporation Limited, right, which belongs to the Ministry of Power, Government of India. The NHPC have the stake of 51% in this joint venture company known as Rattle Hydroelectric Power Corporation Limited. And the second is basically the Jammu and Kashmir State Power Development Corporation Limited, that is the state PSU, right? And this state PSU will have the share of around 49%. So it is totally public sector enterprises. The predominantly share belongs to the NHPC, which consisting of around the equity share of around 51% for the purpose of implementation of this 850 megawatt of Rattle hydropower project. Okay, as I told you that this Rattle hydropower project is basically 850 megawatt, the hydropower electricity generation project. It is a run of the river scheme, right, which is located on the river Chenab in the Jammu and Kashmir, specifically in the Kishtwar district of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, as you know that the Chenab river that we are talking is a major river that flows in India, as well as it also flows in the Pakistan also, right? And it is one of the five major rivers, right, which basically also flows through the Punjab region. Okay, now it is formed by by union of two headwaters, that is the river Chenab, that is formed by two headwaters. The one is known as the Chandra, right? The one headwater is known as Chandra, and the second is basically known as Bhaga. The first headwater is known as Chandra, and the second is known as Bhaga. These two headwaters basically merge, right, or meat, right, and definitely which rise in the upper Himalayas in the Lahul and the Spiti district of Himachal Pradesh, and subsequently it flows through the Kishwar district of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So here in the January 2021 itself, the Union Cabinet have given approval for the investment of around 5,281 crore rupees, right, for this 850 megawatt of the Rettal hydroelectric power project, that is the run of the river project on the river Chenab, and it will be commissioned definitely in the span of 5 years because it's a big construction infrastructure project, okay, for that purpose. And river Chenab having the total length of around 960 kilometers, okay, which flows through, right, through the state of Jammu and Kashmir or Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So it will be just like this, the hydroelectric power project, that it will be looks like this. Okay. Next, the draft model rules for the live streaming and the recording of the court proceedings. Here, the most important is that the E the E committee of the Supreme Court, right? The E committee of the Supreme Court recently released the draft model rules for the live streaming and the recording of the court proceedings. It is one of the most important aspect under Article 21, right? Right. So which also provide the fundamental rights to the citizens, right, to have the timely execution of the project as well as speedier the proceedings in the court also. So that is the most important aspect under Article 21, right? The right to have the speedier the prosecution or speedier adjudication in the court of the law. So if such type of live streaming and the recording of the court proceedings is to be provided to the common people, definitely it will uphold the speedier adjudication of those matters which are still pending in the court of the law, even during that time of the pandemic when the people are unable to find out, right, the way specifically to reaching to the court of the law for their purpose, right. And here specifically the E-Court Committee or E-Committee of the Supreme Court is working for that model, right. So here the E-Committee of the Supreme Court, right, along with the Department of Justice, Government of India, is working under the National Policy and Action Plan for the implementation of information and communication technology in the Indian judiciary. So definitely, right, this E-Committee of the Supreme Court along with the Department of the Justice were providing all sort of a ICT connectivity, right, to to the various levels of the judiciary for the speedier resolution of the court cases which are pending in the various levels of the courts, right, as well as to provide all such IT and ICT information and communication technology connectivity to basically to the Indian judiciary. So here the E committee is basically that we are talking, the E committee of the Supreme Court is basically a governing body that is charged with overseeing the E code project, which is conceptualized under the national policy and action plan for implementation of information and the communication technology, right. So here that is basically we are talking about is E-Codes. The E-Codes is basically the Pan India project which is monitored and funded by the Department of Justice, right, definitely, right, under the Ministry of Law and the Justice, Government of India. So its vision is to transform the judicial system of the country by introducing the ICT or information and communication technology enablement to the courts, definitely to provide the efficient and time bound the citizen-centric services in accordance with the E-Code projects, right, and to develop and install and to implement efficient justice delivery systems in the court by introducing such type of the live streaming and recordings in the court of the law, and to definitely to automate this process by using accessibility of information to all the stakeholders in the system, and definitely that will enhance the judicial productivity both qualitatively and quantitatively. Okay, so here Justice Dhananjay Y Chandrachud is basically a judge who is currently a judge of the Supreme Court, is a basically chairperson of this E committee of the Supreme Court, who is having the in charge of the governing body to oversee the E-Code project which was conceptualized under this project. Okay, so here the right to access to the justice which is guaranteed under Article 21 would definitely would be safeguarded and definitely would be upheld by this, providing this live streaming and the recordings of the court proceedings to the common people, to the all the stakeholders in our country. Okay. Next, the Burkina Faso. The Burkina Faso is basically a country which is a landlocked country, okay, in the West Africa. As you know that it is also a poor country, right? It is being bordered, as I told you, it is a landlocked country. That means it should be bordered from all the sides by the countries. It has no such, the exit in the water bodies. For example, if you see in the northwest direction, it is bordered, to the Mali, which is another country in the West Africa, right? If you see in the northeast, which is another country called Niger, right? To the southeast, you have another country called Benin. Okay, to the south, you have the Togo and the Ghana, and to the southwest, you have another country called Ivory Coast, right? So these are the countries which bordered this Burkina Faso. Okay, now recently, what is happening is that there was a deadly attack on the civilians, specifically in the Burkina Faso, by the militant or by the armed assailants or by the armed militants. Okay, a village, right, in the village, and that killed 160 people, right. The official reports is basically confirming that instead of 130, 160 people have been killed. 160 people have been killed in the village of the Burkina Faso by the armed militant in a village. Okay, so here the gunman basically opened fire at 2 2 a.m. in the night. Okay, they came and they held this village on hostage and they killed almost 160 people in the night. Okay, these assault on the village of the Solhan. The Solhan is basically a village, okay, in Burkina Faso, where this deadly attack was carried out, from basically, armed militants. So here there this heavy armed militants executed the members of the local defense forces. They killed the civilians, destroyed the houses, burned the local market to the ground. Okay, and here this village, that Solhan that we are talking, is basically a dry, the northeast corner of the Burkina Faso, that is basically located near the border of Niger. The Niger is a country in the northeastern side of the Burkina Faso. So this Solhan village is basically located to the border of this country called Niger. Okay, definitely well within the Burkina Faso. Okay, now that we are talking, this region is also very close and to the Sahel region, which is a hot spot for the terrorists, right? Specifically, the government officials blame the attack, right, on the civilians, right, that is linked to the Al Qaeda and the Islamic State, which are behind this attack. So here the Sahel region, right, along the southern stretch of the Sahara Desert, had become the refugees for both Al Qaeda as well as the Islamic State, which have carried out these recent attacks. So here the fighters or these terrorists, basically they move regularly between the Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali. These are the countries where some sort of a unrest or restive region is there, where the refugee related to the Al Qaeda and the Islamic State is basically occupying some territory. So these terrorists used to pass through this Niger, Burkina Faso and the Mali, which are the neighboring countries to the southern side, right? And it become the major smuggling route also for the African migrants, right? Which are trying to get to the Europe during such, the displacement of the people during all such, event that has been carried out. And even after, the thousands of the troops belongs to the UN peacekeeping force is also stationed in the Burkina Faso. Even after that, you have seen 160 innocent people have been killed, right, in this region called Burkina Faso, right. The capital of the Burkina Faso is the Kwanga Dongu, right, which is basically a capital, and the country basically owns its former name that was Upper Volta, right. It is related to the three rivers which crosses, that is called Black Volta, that was also known as the Mawon in the local language, the White Volta, which is also known as the Nakambe, and the Red Volta, which is also known as the Nazinon. Okay, it also have the basin of the Niger River, which also drains around 27% of the country's surface area. Okay, here you have seen, the Burkina Faso, which is a landlocked country. So here you could understand that to the northwest, if you see the Mali, which is bordered the Burkina Faso. Okay, if you see basically the northeast, you have the Niger, which is another country in the in the Western Africa. Okay, if you see the southeast, you have the Benin, right? And if you see, to the southern side, you have the Togo and Ghana. These are the another countries to the south side of the Burkina Faso. Okay, and to the southwest you have the Ivory Coast. Okay, and the capital is, Ouagadougou, which is the capital of Burkina Faso. Okay, next you have the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Okay. Now, recently, the India had been elected to the United Nations Economic and the Social Council for the term of 2022 to 2024. That is for the term of 3 years. So here the time is that the UN Charter, which established this United Nations Economic and the Social Council in 1945. It is one of the six main organs of the United Nations. Okay. Now, that we are talking about this organ of the United Nations. The United Nations Economic and the Social Council is basically is at the heart of the United Nations system to advance, the three dimensions of the sustainable development. For example, the economic development, social development, and environmental development. So you can say that the United Nations Economic and the Social Council is basically a central platform for fostering the debates and, for innovative thinkings, for forging consensus on the ways by which, we took forward and coordinate efforts to achieve some sort of, agreed goal. Let's say, for example, the sustainable development goals, right? And then it will also follow up some sort of a conferences and the summits which also carried out under the auspices of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So here the another six main organs that we are talking is one of the six main organs. So what are these six organs? So first of all, you have the General Assembly. The General Assembly is the first main organ of the United Nations system. The second is basically the Security Council, or simple, the United Nations Security Council. The third is basically the Economic and the Social Council, that we are talking about, the United Nations Economic and the Social Council, right? And the fourth is basically your Trusteeship Council. Okay, uh, and basically fifth is your Secretariat. The fifth is this Secretariat, or United Nations Secretariat. These five that I have just now indicated. The first is General Assembly. Okay, second is the United Nations Security Council. The third is basically the United Nations Economic and the Social Council. The fourth is basically Trusteeship Council, and the fifth is basically United Nations Secretariat. These all five main organs of the United Nations systems are basically headquartered at the UN headquartered in New York. The UN headquartered located in New York. Okay, that's the another sixth organ that is known as the International Court of Justice. This International Court of Justice is the sixth organ of the United Nations. The system, which is currently located at The Hague. The Hague, which is basically a place in Netherlands, right, which is a country. Okay, now here the members basically, or the council, or the United Nations Economic and the Social Council, consisting of the 54 member states. Okay, these 54 member states are which are elected by the General Assembly for overlapping 3-year terms. Okay, so here the India will get this term from 2022 to 2024. Okay, so that is 2022, 23, and 24. Okay, now the seats in the council, or the United Nations Economic and the Social Councils, are basically allocated, right? There are 54 member states in the United Nations Economic and the Social Council. These 54 member states are selected based on the geographical representation. For example, in the African states, okay, or in the African the area of African continent, 14 states, or the 14 members will be chosen. Okay, from the Asian states, around 11 members will be chosen. From European states, around 6 members will be chosen. From Latin American and the Caribbean states, around 10 members will be chosen. Okay, from West European and other states, around 13 members will be chosen in the 54 members of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Okay, let us understand about the mandate of the United Nations Economic and the Social Council. So mandate is very simple. It is a central platform for the purpose of fostering this debate and innovative thinkings among the members, for forcing the consensus to find out any sort of a way forward, and to coordinate the efforts among international community. It is also responsible for the follow-up of the major UN conferences and the summits which are taken place under the auspices of, right, the United Nations system. So you can say that the United Nations economic and the social council basically links the diverse family of UN entities, right, which are dedicated for the sustainable development, okay, and which also provide the overall guidance and the coordination to all the member states. So here the entities include the regional and economic social commissions, the functional commissions facilitating the intergovernmental discussions on the major global issues, okay, some of the specialized agencies, right, the programs and the funds at work around the world to to translate some sort of a developmental commitment to the real changes in the people's life. So all such mandates are basically related to the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So here this the Economic and the Social Council basically also held the high level you know segment or annual high level segment that include the high level political forum, okay, which basically reviews the implementation of the sustainable development or 2030 sustainable development goals, which is convened under the auspices of the council every July, okay. And it will also have the development corporation forum, right, which reviews the trend and the progress in the developmental corporation for that purpose, okay. It is also has the specialized agencies, right, of the United Nations, which are the autonomous organization working under the United Nations system, right, and they report their activities to to the Economic and the Social Council, right, which are mostly having their own sort of a working system for that purpose or working mechanism for that purpose. Here you have the United Nations Economic and Social Council, which are currently or which are basically currently the progress of the meeting, their meeting. Okay. Next you have INS, the Sandhayak, right? This INS Sandhayak is basically the Indian Navy's, the oldest hydrographic survey vessel. Okay. So this hydrographic survey vessel, which was commissioned 40 years back, now it has been recently decommissioned, right, at the naval dockyard in the Vishakhapatnam after completing the 40 years of the glorious service to the Indian Navy or to the nation. Okay, so this IAS Sandhayak that we are talking is basically undertook the 200 major hydrographic surveys. Now let us understand what is this hydrographic surveys on what is this hydrographic survey vessel. What is that? Okay, so that we are talking about the hydrography. First of all, let us understand hydrography. See, hydrography is a science, okay, that measures and describes the physical features of the navigable portion of the earth's surface, that means under the water, okay, as well as the adjoining coastal areas. So hydrographic surveyors study these bodies of the water to see what the floors looks like. So a vessel or the hydrographic survey vessel which equipped with hydrographic survey equipments to determine some sort of a underground water topography, right, to produce some sort of a charts to help in navigation. Okay, this shows that another they're able to measure some sort of water depths, right, to scan the seabed in order to locate some sort of a wrecks or some sort of a underwater obstacles, and to verify exact position of the buoys and some other markers for the purpose of navigation. Okay, and it also consisting of several operations, like for example the task in the shallow waters, right, it is also consisting of some sort of a survey launches, right, which acted as just like a daughter vessel, right, which collected the data, right, for the purpose of the mothership for the safely navigation of those ships. Okay, now here this Sandhai class survey vehicle or survey vessel or hydrographic survey vessel is basically consisting of the series of the 8 vessels which are built by the Garden Reach Shipbuilders and the Engineers Limited, which is currently located in Kolkata, as well as the Goa Shipyard Limited, which is located in the Basco in the Goa for the Indian Navy. So at the Garden Reach Shipbuilders and the Engineers Limited, right, is one of the India's the leading shipyards which are currently located in Kolkata, in the West Bengal. It built and the repairs the commercial as well as the naval vessels. Okay, so here the Garden Reach Shipbuilders and the Engineers is basically a shipbuilding company in India under the administrative control of the Ministry of Defense. Okay, and it is primarily catering to the shipbuilding requirement of the Indian Navy as well as to the Indian Coast Guard for that purpose. Okay, now here the ship that we are talking about have also took the important operations like the Operation Pawan that was carried out in the Sri Lanka in 1987. If you remember, in the Operation Pawan, which was the code named, which was assigned to the operation by the Indian peacekeeping force, right, when the LTT or Liberation of Tamil ILM, right, these basically the fighters basically took control of the Jaffna. So this Operation Pawan was basically launched. It was codenamed to for the operation by the Indian peacekeeping forces to take back the control of the Jaffna from the fighters of the liberation of the Tigers of the Tamil Tamililam, or simple LTT. Okay, so here in the late 1987, to enforce the disarmament of LTT, right, it was all along, or it was as per the accord of the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord that was signed between India and Sri Lanka. The second operation that was conducted by this ship was Operation Rainbow, that is for the humanitarian assistance in the aftermath of tsunami that was occurred in 2004. Okay, so Operation Rainbow, that was basically for the humanitarian assessment. So here government of India also extended the relief assistance to the tsunami affected countries, right, like Sri Lanka, Maldives, Thailand and Indonesia, when the tsunami basically hit in 2014 in the Indian Ocean. Okay, so in the case of Sri Lanka, right, the composite relief package was basically given by the government of India, that was around 100 crore rupees. Okay, and Indian Navy basically launched that operation that is known as Operation Rainbow to provide the relief and the rescue assistance to the Sri Lanka under this operation. And the third is basically the Indo-US HADR exercise Tiger Trump, this was carried out in 2019 with the help of this hydrographic ship. So here this India and the US joint tri-services matlab Indian Navy, right, Indian Air Force as well as the Indian Army, these are the tri-services. So Indo-US joint tri-services humanitarian assistance and the disaster relief. Here HADR means the humanitarian assistance and the disaster relief exercise, which is known as the Tiger Trump, was basically also undertook by this INS Sandhayak. So INS Sandhayak was involved in Operation Pawan. The INS Sandhayak was also involved in Operation Rainbow. The INS Sandhayak was also involved in this Indo-US HADR exercise, which is also known as the Tiger Trump in 2019. Okay, so here the Operation Sandhayak, which was recently been retired or recently been decommissioned, right, at the Visakhapatnam after completing the 40 years of the glorious service to the Indian Navy. Okay, next the Aravali. Okay, as you know that Aravali is basically a mountain. It's a range of the mountain. It's a series of the mountains, right, in the northwestern India. In the northwestern India, which basically encompassing, or which basically passes across the northwestern states like Delhi, Haryana, Rajasthan, as well as Gujarat also. So here, what is the background of this news is that there are thousands of unauthorized or illegal constructions or the residential constructions in the ecological fragile the Aravali forest areas, right, near the Lakharpur Khori village. Okay, now here more than 10,000 residential construction are illegally constructed. They are unauthorized, so they have just encroached this the ecologically fragile Aravali forest region. So here the Supreme Court recently ordered the Haryana government, right, as well as the Faridabad Municipal Corporation to take all essential measures to remove these encroachments, which are basically encroached all along this fragile Aravali forest area, right, specifically in the Lakharpur Khori village in the Haryana state. So here the Aravali range is basically a mountain range which passes through the northwestern India. It basically passes through the Delhi, okay, through the southern Haryana, through the Rajasthan, and it is also ending up to the Gujarat. So total the length of the Aravali range is around 670 kilometers or around 430 miles in the southwestern direction. Okay. The highest peak of the Aravali range is basically the Guru Shikhar, which is currently at the height of around 1722 meters. Okay, the Guru Shikhar peak is basically located on the Arbuda mountains of the Rajasthan. It is just 15 kilometers from the Mount Abu, which is the famous hill station in the Rajasthan. Okay, and here the three major rivers and the tributary flows from the Aravali, right? That is also known as the Banas, Sahibi river, as well as the Luni river. So let us understand briefly about these rivers. So first let us understand about the Banas river. See, Banas river is a river that lies entirely within the state of Rajasthan. Okay, and the Banas river basically it is a tributary of Chambal river. The Chambal river also passes through the Rajasthan, and the Chambal river is a tributary of Yamuna. So indirectly you can say that the Banas is a tributary of Yamuna, but exactly the Banas is basically a tributary of Chambal, and Chambal is a tributary of Yamuna. So indirectly you can say that the Banas is also tributary of the Yamuna river, right? Second is basically the Sahibi river. The Sahibi river is also known as the Sabi river. It is basically a ephemeral river. What is this ephemeral river? The ephemeral river means it is basically the short lived, or it is basically lived for the shorter period of the time, that is only through during the rain fed time, or it is just like during precipitation time. This Sahibi river basically flows. Okay, so it is a ephemeral river, which basically the rain fed river flowing through the Rajasthan, Haryana. Okay, and it also flows through the Delhi in our country, and it basically ultimately drains into the Yamuna in Delhi. Then the most important river is Luni River, as the Luni River is the largest river in the Thar desert of the country of Rajasthan. Okay, it originates in the Pushkar Valley, in the Rajasthan, in the Aravali Range near Ajmer, where the famous Pushkar Lake is also located. Pushkar Fair is also organized over there. It passes through the southeastern portion of the Thar Desert also, and ultimately ended in to reaching up to the marshy lands of Run of Kutch in the Gujarat. Okay, there it basically disappeared in this marshy Run of Kutch. It travels around 495 kilometers through Rajasthan and reaching up to the Gujarat borders. Okay. Next, the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. Okay, here the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited is basically is a public entity, right? It's a name which is coined for the bad bank. That means those bad loans which are basically not being recovered by the banks, right? So here the bad loans of around 22 such bad loans consisting of around 89,000 crore rupees will be transferred to this newly set up the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited in the initial phase. So it will be it is also known as the bad bank, which is basically set up in the as a public bank or as a public bad bank, right, which was announced in the budget 2021-22, right, and it is expected to the operation in the month of June 2021 for the purpose of recovering of this bad assets or the bad loans from the basically debtors, or from those who have taken the debts. So here the bad banks basically referring to the financial institution, right, that will basically taken over such type of bad loans or the bad assets from the banks or from the lenders or from the lending institutions or the financing institutions, and subsequently it will also undertake some sort of a resolution, or through that the recovering process will be continued. So here that we are talking about this National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. Okay, here this new entity is created in the collaboration with both public and the private sector banks. Okay, definitely, because the public and the private sector banks equally are basically suffering from this bad loans. So it is established on the asset reconstruction company as well as the asset management company model. Okay, and finance minister Miss Nirmala Sitharaman in the budget speech in 2021-22 announced, right, the setting up of this the National Asset Reconstruction Company, right, to clean the bank books, specifically to recover those bad assets or the stress assets from those debtors. Okay, here the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited will pay around 15% of the agreed value for the loans, specifically to those lenders in the cash, and remaining 85% would be paid, right, to the government guarantee security receipt to that purpose. Okay, and the government guarantee would be invoked if there is a loss against this threshold value, right? And the Reserve Bank of India recently has said that if the loans which are classified as a fraud, okay, cannot be sold to this National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. So as per the annual report, around 1.9 lakh crore of the money of the loan is basically have been classified as a fraud, which will not be taken over by this National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. Okay, next, the performance grading index for the school education. Okay, recently the education ministry have launched the latest edition of the performance grading index for the school education in the in the states. So education ministry or union education ministry basically released this performance grading index, right, since in 2019. So first such performance grading index was launched in 2019, which have taken the reference year of 2017 and 18. Okay, so the methodology which was adopted, that the states which are scored, right, so the states are basically grouped, right, in a basically based on certain parameters, and they have been given, right, the score out of 1000 points, and they have been assessed over 70 parameters, right? So here these states have been grouped under 5 broad categories, or these parameters which have been grouped under the 5 broad categories to assess those states specifically, based on this performance grading index. So here the first and the most important is the 5 broad categories for the assessment, that is called X. The first is called access. What is access? Access means in the form of enrollment ratio, the transition rate, the retention rate in the schools, right? Then the second is governance and the management. What is that? See, in the governance and the management, that is how better is the governing situations or governing mechanism and the management in respect to the school system in this in the state. The next is basically infrastructure, how well the classrooms are maintained, right? Is there facilities for the potable water, right? Enough sanitation facilities are provided to the schools, right? Infrastructure basically include every sort of a the facilities which are in the form of structure, like the classrooms, the toilets, washrooms, right? All such facilities which are provided to the people or to the children's. Then you have the equity and learning outcome. This is the most important, right? It is basically calculated in difference in the performance between the scheduled caste students, the scheduled tribe students, as well as the general category students, right? And the learning outcomes basically some sort of a average score in the mathematics, in the science, in the social science, in the languages, how the states basically perform in that respect. So here the most important aspect is that this performance grading index, right, it is not ranking the states, right? Right, because if the state started ranked, or state started making or the union education ministry started making the ranking to the states, it will definitely discourage the practice of improving, right, at the cost of another. So it is, the states are basically graded means the objective of this basically the performance grading index is to help the states to prioritize the areas for the intervention in the school education, okay, for that purpose. And now the states are basically graded under it. So presently you have the 10 labels, right, for the states to be graded. So first label, which indicate the top notch performance or top notch performers states, right? These level 1, right, the topmost level, basically all those states which scored around between 951 to 1000 points. So unfortunately in the year of 2019-20, no states, no Indian states or no union territory could achieve this highest level, that is a level 1. So currently there is no states, there is no states, right, as well as the union territory, right, in this level 1 of this performance grading index of the union education ministry. No states are there in that. That is highest cause of the worry. In the level second, which is also known as the grade 1 plus plus, indicates the states which is having the score of around 901 to 950, Okay, in the label 2, right, there are various states in the union territory which are there. For example, the Chandigarh, which is a union territory, is in the label 2. Then Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, as well as the Kerala, right? These, these 5 states and the union territory comes under the label 2 on the grade 1 plus plus. I'll again repeat: Chandigarh, Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, as well as the Kerala. Okay, and the another label that is called label 3, that is also having the grade 1 plus, right, where which consisting of the states having the score between 851 to 900, and the lowest grade for that purpose is grade 7, right, which is also known as the label 10. Okay, it means it is having the score of around 0 to 550. In this lowest label, the ladakh only the Ladakh, which is also, you know, recently created the union territory in the year of 2019. So only union territory of Ladakh have been placed, right, in the lowest grade, right, that is grade 7th. But that is because it was the first time, right, this union territory of the Ladakh, it was assessed after it was converted, after it was carved out of the union of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, right? So here the union territory of Ladakh was formed. It is the first time it was incorporated. All right. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. We'll again meet tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you.